Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to see everybody here tonight. I'm Liz Niss. I'm a former city council member, a former mayor, and a former Santa Clara County supervisor. It's my great pleasure to introduce you tonight to this program on housing that I think is going to be a memorable one. So I'd like to say first, welcome to the public meeting on housing in Palo Alto, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto and co-sponsoring organizations Alta Housing, Palo Alto Forward, Palo Alto Community Fund, and the League of Women Voters, Santa Clara County. The purpose of this meeting is to have you deliberate about what choices Palo Alto has for increasing housing for everyone, for all. There will be speakers describing the current situation and options forward, and there will also be time for you to express your thoughts about those options. We are proud to have John Barton, a former colleague of mine, as the moderator. John is the director of Stanford's Architectural Design Program, former Palo Alto Council member, former Palo Alto Unified School Board member, and founding member of the community working group that built the Palo Alto Opportunity Center. I'd now like to introduce Dan Zales, the lead organizer of this event. Dan will explain the agenda, then turn it over to John. So as I said, welcome everyone. As president of our local League of Women Voters, I'm absolutely proud to be introducing this program tonight. So here's to you, Dan, and then it will go to John.
Thank you, Liz. So we've scheduled this event for 90 minutes. After John's opening remarks, there will be 20 minutes for impact stories about people struggling with housing in Palo Alto. There will be 3 speakers for that segment. John will introduce the speakers. Then Stephen Levy will take 15 minutes to talk about housing for all options. After that, everybody will fill out a survey that comes with this meeting. The survey is about options for dealing with housing challenges in Palo Alto. It's a series of 10 statements that you will express to what extent you agree or disagree with. The results will display as you fill out the survey, and we will look at those together. Then you will divide into breakout groups for 20 minutes. The purpose is for you to express your preferences for what should be done to move forward with housing for all, as well as an opportunity to pose questions to each other. You will want to unmute for this segment. Following the breakouts, we will come together for the final segment. The facilitators of your groups will report on the highlights. Then there will be time for you to type into the chat questions that you may have for the speakers. I will read the questions and ask the speakers who wants to which speaker wants to volunteer to answer a particular question. And then John will offer closing comments, and that'll be our 90 minutes. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John Barton, our moderator.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about some of the challenges associated with affordable housing. Can you all see my screen? And that will hopefully put a basket underneath the specific issues of a Palo Alto. As I was indicated, I'm the director of the Stanford Architectural Design Program and the founding member of the Community Working Group, also a former board member of the Housing Trust of Silicon Valley. So I'm going to talk a little bit, as I said, about the challenges that we face and the complexity of the problem associated with housing. So one of the first is population. We're going to grow. In 2015, the Bay Area population was about 7.5 million. It's going to jump to close to 10 million by 2040. And Santa Clara County will see the highest percentage growth of all the counties in the Bay Area. There's a secondary problem with jobs. Many of the people moving here, more than half, will be in low-paying jobs. Many of them will be paid less than $11 an hour. I hasten to say that in the upheaval of the job market and the sociological issues associated with COVID. Some of these things are scrambled and may change, but this is the best data we have at the moment. And even with new high-tech jobs, they create 5 to 6 new low-paying service jobs. So it's not a win-win. Poverty rates are ticking up from 2005 to 2009. The Santa Clara poverty rate averaged about 8.5%. It jumped up to nearly 10% in the first half of the last decade. It's dropped a little bit, and that's probably a result of some of the stimulus funds and a few other things that are scrambling the data, but it's still a very high number. And 50% of Bay Area residents can't pay their bills at least once a year. That's a stunning statistic. Another component of poverty is 60% of Santa Clara County residents are low income or very low income. And nearly 7,500 Santa Clara County residents were homeless in 2017. And that's up from 2015, and it's up further now as we're seeing through my work with Abode Services and Community Working Group. The poverty rate has multiple components. You'll see that the Bay Area residents needing help with multiple components, whether it's food, housing, classes, taxes, or children. They're struggling to make ends meet, and housing costs, as we'll talk about in a few moments, don't make it any easier. We have some macroeconomic challenges. Our economy is booming in general, locally and nationally, but it's not booming for all. Middle income has fallen for nearly 40 years, nearly 50 years, really. Upper incomes have increased, lower incomes haven't changed, adjusted for inflation. So the ability for middle income and low income to pay for housing is substantially reduced. We also have an alarming inequality developing. You'll see in these charts, up to 1980, people across multiple income groups were roughly sharing in the economic benefits of the economy. But as you can see, since then, those with high incomes have done much better, and those in the median and lower incomes have been flat. And the top 1% and 0.5% dipped precipitously from the 1920s to 1970, but they have regained their Gilded Age place in the economy, and leaving middle income and low income people with less resources and less ability to pay. Housing is simply unaffordable. Adjusted for family size and location, nearly 40% of Santa Clara households are spending more than recommended on their housing by HUD standards and are defined as rent burden. They're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And rents are increasing at an amazing rate, and house prices are increasing at an amazing rate, but wages have remained flat. And again, some wages are starting to creep up in the scrambled world of the post-COVID job market, but they've got a long way to go to catch up from being stagnant since 1970. So an average renting family would need to make $90,000 in order to stay under the 30% mark to pay rent for the average house or apartment in Santa Clara County. But most jobs are going to pay around $11 an hour. So they would need to, and they're only going to make $22,800. So the gap is extraordinary. And that's led to, in Santa Clara County, more than 51,000 don't have access to an affordable home. they're renting with other families, they're renting a garage, they're multiple generations in a household in order to make the rent work. And I think this is probably the most shocking chart I'm going to show, and I'm going to spend some time on it. On the left-hand side is expenditures in billions of dollars for housing, including mortgage deduction. And you'll see that those who make 100 to 200,000 and more than 200,000 make up the bulk of expenditures for housing. Now, most of that is mortgage deductions, but you can see on the right, households with severe cost burdens, 7.6% are folks who make less than $10,000, but the expenditure from the federal government for their challenges is extremely small. When we talk about subsidies, and we'll probably talk about subsidies tonight in the Q&A section, we all have to remember that we live in subsidized housing. If we own a house in Palo Alto or we live in an apartment in Palo Alto, we live in subsidized housing. And our subsidies are substantially larger than the subsidies for those who struggle to find housing and who ultimately find housing in low-income housing. So what's the fallout to all of this? So one, and I saw this and Liz saw this when she was on the city council and I was on the city council, essential workers live an hour away or more from their jobs. That's a recipe for disaster in a disaster scenario. Workers travel to work multiple jobs and they're not spending time with their family. They're not going to their kids' soccer games. They're not going to their daughter's music performance because they have to spend time on the road and to an area of substantially cheaper housing. Rent burdens live in areas with lower performing schools, and this perpetuates poverty. It creates another generation of folks who will struggle to make ends meet. They live further from good health care. Workers with inadequate or overly expensive housing are more likely to use the emergency room for health care, and that's a real challenge. But let's hear directly from those most impacted by these challenges and those who serve them, and then we'll hear from Steve, who will talk a little bit about the specific plans for Palo Alto and what we can do together. So we have some speakers. I will stop sharing. And the first speaker is John Matthias from Life Moves, and he is a caseworker at the Opportunity Service Center at the Opportunity Center. John, you've got about 7 minutes, and if it looks like you're still going at about 6 minutes, I'll jump in and let you know you've got a minute to go.
Cool. Thank you so much, John. Greetings, everyone. Good evening. My name is John Matthias. As was mentioned, I'm one of the case managers at the Opportunity Center, program managed by Life Moves. I've been with the program for going on my second year now, and I've been working really closely with a lot of the organizations in Palo Alto. Regarding the people experiencing homelessness in Palo Alto, we service about 50 to 70 people a day. And the individuals that go through are cycled heavily, so it's not always the same group of people. Maybe 20 out of the 70 might be the same. It's just a constant cycle of new people experiencing issues. It's very difficult for a large majority of these individuals, 50+%, to support themselves in a traditional full-time working job. Most of them are being supported through other government subsidies, often Social Security, general assistance, programs like that. And even at those points, they cannot afford market rate housing, especially in Palo Alto. It's just not feasible. There are very limited low income, below market rate housing programs that would take percentages of their income rather than a flat rate. But those are extremely, extremely rare, few far between. The Opportunity Center has transitional housing apartments, single room occupancy, and multifamily apartment units. And those are roughly like a 1.5 year wait for a person to be able to utilize that after application. So between those, and that's not an uncommon wait period for any kind of apartment unit like that across the Bay Area. So from time of application to being able to utilize those housing services, it's a very difficult thing for a large majority of our clients to live with. Very few shelter opportunities in Palo Alto outside of a couple of night-only church programs. So they would have to travel very far distances to utilize shelter programs, often for Santa Clara County and Sunnyvale, or larger cities like San Jose. And that commute to their community of Palo Alto is a huge stress burden. It's more than just like a 20-minute drive for an individual. It's closer to like an 1.5 hours. So it just adds to that. Other unconventional housing methods that individuals have to go through are double downing on rooms if they can find a landlord that can allow multiple people in a room. Oftentimes it's easier, more convenient, more realistic for them to choose to live outside of the Bay Area. And that is a very common realization for people that don't have a lot of community or family ties that provide a safe foundation for them here. We had a recent shelter open up in Mountain View that has been a huge positive impact for individuals experiencing homelessness in Palo Alto, where they get their own rooms, and that has had a huge impact on a lot of their lives, where they are able to be stable for more than just an evening. The average shelter wait period for a person that wants to do it right now is over a week. And that is a huge impact, where after that week period, they may not have that kind of trust and reliability with the community anymore. And when they once were willing to use a shelter or to seek services and assistance, they're no longer able to, due to that huge delay from asking for services and receiving services outside of single day services like a food pantry or services that we provide at the Opportunity Center.
Got about a minute, John.
Cool. Thank you. And then the final bit is for long-term goals. It's difficult to find housing opportunities that once they access, they're able to maintain and remain stable, which is a very difficult barrier for a significant portion that are on disability for a lot of the mental health barriers. So that it's very, very limited resources for long-term stable housing. Thank you.
Next is Mohammed Chakmachi, who's a green middle school teacher in Palo Alto.
Hi. So I have a little bit of a slideshow. I think I can share my screen. And
I can try sharing your screen, or I can show it too if you having trouble.
I think it'll let me share. It says share screen.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and try that?
Here we go.
Good.
All right, I got a lot of tabs open, sorry. Go to slideshow here. Go back here. Okay. Hi, my name is Mohammed. Friends call me Mo. And kids call me Mr. C. I'm a teacher at Green Middle School, as Dan said. And I love my job. That's me today, actually, with a coworker. I teach Spanish immersion, and I also teach drama. And I've been teaching since 2006. It's my fourth year at Green. And it's just been an incredible journey in education. I've worked with a lot of different kind of communities, highly impacted communities, mixed communities. And it's just an incredible opportunity to be of service to families and kids. And during the pandemic, my family and I had a rough go of it. My spouse and I separated and divorced, and we're separating in the process of it. And she and I together owned daycares. And when the pandemic hit, everything closed. And so, she had like about 3 daycares and was grossing, a pretty good amount of money, about 50, 60K. She had about 15 to 20 employees. And then the company went bankrupt because, went from 50 to 60 to 0 overnight. So that was hard. And subsequently, after the company went bankrupt, because I had co-signed on some of these loans, I ended up going into bankruptcy too. So that was something I never expected. I didn't know anything about. And it was, one of those COVID things that happened. But I had a house and I had a really good job and I thought I was going to be okay. But in September, my landlord said, "Oh, well, we think we'd like you to leave." And I was like, I'm pretty certain that's not legal. And they wouldn't respond to me. They weren't emailing me back. I was calling, like, I'm pretty sure the law says you can't do that. And I was right. And they didn't like that. So they hired a big time attorney. And, he sent me all these letters. And so I ended up having to pay for legal counsel. And my lawyer got together with him, and together they realized, oh yeah, he's right. And initially they wanted to, kick me out during Thanksgiving. And I said, I'd rather invest in a lawyer and be able to stay, in my house rather than being packing. And so what I ended up doing was doing that, and was able to spend Thanksgiving with my parents who live down in Southern California. That's my mom and dad. Over on the left, my older daughters, the 2 little boys, those are my nephews, and the little girl in the middle is my daughter's Thalia. And she lives with me. The girls are older, they're college students, and I also have a son who goes to Palliative. He stays mostly with his mom, but my 7-year-old, she really likes her dad. She likes staying with me, and so we spend a lot of time together. And I try to talk to the landlords. I say, hey, this is like this house is on a special list. They said they ended up saying, oh, when I got back from Thanksgiving, they sent me another note saying that they were going to evict me with just cause, saying that because they needed to renovate the place, and they were taking it off the market. And I was like, well, the place is on a special list here in Palo Alto. You can't just renovate it. You got to apply to the city. It's going to take you 6 months. Would you just let me stay till the end of the school year? And because I'm a teacher here and I've got all this work to do, and my daughter goes to Addison, and and at the time in December, I was putting on a play, and that's a lot of work. You can see here, those are my drama students. We had a great time, and we put on a play at Addison for the elementary school kids there, because they just hadn't had any experiences together, community experiences. And every semester we put on a play, and I felt it would be nice to do some outreach. And it's hard when you put on a play, because you work from 8 to 3 or 3:15 teaching, and then you go after hours from 4 to 7, 7:30, 8 o'clock. You're building sets and rehearsing and sending letters to parents and all the stuff that you got to do.
Mo, you got about 1 minute.
Oh, thanks. So during the month of December, it was kind of hard for me to think about looking for housing. And then the break came. I ended up getting COVID, but I came back and I was hoping that there would be some kind of negotiation. And I tried to explain to the owners, like, I got this kid, and she kind of likes having her dad being housed, and this is a really exceptional time. But they weren't interested in doing that. So that's Thalia. That's our dog. That's her in my classroom. In any case, that's a little bit of my story. Right now, I have to be out by initially it was going to Friday. They've extended it till Monday. The community got together, and on Sunday, representative from Palo Alto Rental Association started to GoFundMe because I just didn't have the funds to move. And it's really hard. And they started to GoFundMe, and there was a big outpouring of love and support. And I'm going to go over by about 30 seconds because I just wanted to say one more thing. I'm still looking for housing, right? And it's not easy. Currently, I'm waiting for people to approve me, even with this outpouring of support and love. I don't know. I mean, there's a possibility that I could. Before what happened, there a lot of people reached out to me, but it was looking like I was going to be living in my car for a while. And that was kind of a daunting thing to think about. In any case, that's my story. Today is Wednesday. I've got 5 more days of housing that I know of. And then next week, by Monday, if I don't find something, there's a family that said that they would let me stay at their house for a couple of weeks. And I'm hoping that something comes through in the meantime. So
Thank you,
appreciate
Mo.
the
We're all
opportunity.
thinking good thoughts for you and your family. It's a challenging situation. The last impact story is from Christian Beauvoir from the Palo Alto Renters Association.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christian Beauvoir. I'm an organizer with the Palo Alto Renters Association. And thanks, Mo, for sharing your story. I know you're going through it right now. So for you to come and share with folks why you're going through it so they can see what they can do, and also that this is a real issue for people in Palo Alto. Just wanted to say thanks. So I want to start by just saying a little bit on who the Rental Association is, and then talk about the broader context of what people are going through, what we're seeing, and then what people can do. So PARA, or the Palo Alto Renters Association, was formed in 2020 around a vision of equity for tenants. So we're a volunteer-led group of Palo Alto community members focused on renters' rights and increasing tenants' voices, and we represent 46% of Palo Alto's population. And we focus on meeting people's immediate needs and then building systems and policies that can support them long-term. So right now we're focusing on passing policies to support tenants. So a rent registry, eviction protections, tenant relocation supports, also political education, stopping harassment, and increasing affordable housing. So I just want folks to stop for a second and just think think to yourself, if you have ever been in a crisis in your life, or if you've supported someone who's been in a crisis, if you've ever been sick, if you've ever had to take time off of work to support someone else who is sick, being in crisis, going through struggles, especially during the middle of a pandemic, is just part of all of our lives. And we need to build support systems to carry another through these difficult times. And right now we're not doing it. Right now, even if you're doing everything right, even if, like Mohammed, you're a father, you are a teacher, if you're a business owner, you can still, because a landlord says you have to go under shady pretenses, be threatened with homelessness. And what we're seeing is Mohammed's story is really heartbreaking, but it's also very common. We have people reaching out to us every day because they're getting evicted, We're seeing mass evictions. We're seeing people being harassed by their landlords. Someone was telling us today that they have a disability. Their landlord isn't responding to them and the heat isn't working in their building, even though they're paying for it. We're seeing a lot of folks who are on fixed incomes, who have lived in Palo Alto for 30 years, whose rent is lower and who are getting out of their buildings so that the landlord can have someone else in the building that they can charge more. Housing is really, it's a fluid situation. It's really insecure, and people are in crisis away, or one landlord saying they want to demolish a building or just get someone else in there from being homeless. And we're seeing this be the case for a lot of people. And housing insecurity is not like the wind and the weather. It's not like a naturally occurring phenomenon. It happens because we build policies that allow for housing costs to rise. We build policies that make access to affordable housing almost impossible. And we make policies that say it's okay to push people out of their houses to make more money. But we need to build policies. We need to build support systems to hold people when we're at our worst, when we're struggling, when we're in a pandemic, when someone gets sick, when we lose a job or a family member gets sick, when you're really tired or burnt out, when you're raising a family. And I also want to say, like, even when you're not doing all the right things, like, we shouldn't always be looking for like excuses to disqualify people from their humanity and ours. We should be looking to support one another. That's like what a good community does. Yeah, it's been really heartbreaking to hear and overwhelming to hear all the stories of people who are reaching out to us, who are saying like, not only if I get kicked out of my building, can I not find somewhere else in Palo Alto where my doctor is, where my children go to school, where my grandchildren go to school, where the resources in my family is. Not only can I not stay in Palo Alto, but I can't afford to live anywhere else in the Bay Area. And not only can I not afford to live anywhere else in the Bay Area, I can't afford to relocate. It's like too common of a story for us to just think that this is just a few people, or for us to just sweep it under the rug. So I do want to finish off by saying a couple things that folks can do to make an impact. So the smallest thing is sign up for our email list. You can go to paloaltorenters.org and sign up for our email. We have updates. Sometimes we'll have requests to support individuals. Sometimes it'll be signing on to a petition. Sometimes it will be calling to city council. But it's really important that we lift up our voices to say it is important in Palo Alto for people to have a place to live. You can call your city council member and tell them to pass rent protections and to pass them now. So we need a rent survey. We need supports for renter relocation. We need to pass eviction protections and right to counsel. And we need to increase access to affordable housing in Palo Alto. And we need to do these things fast. Policy often takes really long, but people are being kicked out of their homes now. People have nowhere else to go now. Got it, thanks. It's a very urgent need. And it's not just like something that we can put off until later. If people don't have anywhere else to go in the meantime, they don't have anywhere else to go. And the last thing we can do, so sign up for the email list, call city council, tell them to do those things and do them now. And you can just also really good community member, support one another. We're all trying to have a community where one another, like where we are caring for one another, where we're supported and cared for, and we can support and care for one another. So like make sure that like we are creating a society where we can all live comfortably, safely, successfully, like even when we're at our worst. Yeah, so I look forward to hearing from folks if they have any other questions, but thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Christian. We're now going to turn to Steve Levy. He is the Director and Senior Economist of the Center for Continuing Study of the California Economy. In Palo Alto, CCSCE is a private research organization founded in 1969 to provide an independent assessment of economic and demographic trends in California. And he will talk a little bit about the specifics of housing in Palo Alto.
Thank you. Thank Liz and the League for this event. Professionally, as Dan said, I'm a regional economist, but for tonight, I'm co-chair of the League's Housing and Transportation Committee, and I'm managing a grant from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation to help people engage in their city's housing element update process. Every city in the Bay Area is doing that in 2022, Palo Alto among them. And at the end of this session, you all are going to go into breakout rooms and give ideas on solutions. That's not my role here. I'm here to explain the housing element update process, what Palo Alto is being asked to do, and some of the issues that the Housing Element Working Group has surfaced. So Palo Alto has been given a goal for soliciting effective housing proposals from the state and from the regional planning agency, ABAG. I'm going to show one slide, and if Dan could put that up now. Dan? Okay. That's why this event is called Housing for All. Those are our city's targets for soliciting housing proposals for 4 different income groups. And there's absolutely no question, if you've been listening to the prior speakers, that the housing challenges faced by the people in the very low income group and some in the low income group are much more severe than housing challenges elsewhere. But one of the things that's happened in the last few years, exemplified by the fact that Palo Alto is now considering a teacher housing proposal, is that people in that moderate income group making $80, $90, $100, $110,000 a year are having trouble finding housing they can afford, not just here, but all up and down the peninsula. So it's housing for all. You can take that down now. That goal was developed in 2 steps. The state gave our region, the Bay Area, a very large housing goal, as it did for every other region. The reason that it's higher now is that in addition to planning for growth, the state legislature asked Housing and Community Development to address the challenges of existing residents, which you heard about. The biggest one is overcrowding. The second biggest one is cost burden. And the third one is there's simply not enough houses to keep prices and rents from going way up. And as a result, if you remember what that chart looked like, over half of the housing is planned for low and moderate income groups, because they're the ones that are most struggling. But the other thing that's true at the regional level, and then I'll move on, is that half of the housing target is for existing residents. There's a growth increment, but it's actually not any larger than it was before. What is larger is the desire and the legislative requirement to address existing residents. The regional agency, ABAG, allocated the regional target to all the cities. And Palo Alto got an extra allocation for 2 main reasons that are very important for the later discussions. We were classified as a high opportunity area. So was Menlo Park, Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Mountain View. A high opportunity area meant a place where if low and moderate income families were able to live there, that the economic opportunities and success for them and their children would be improved. There's a huge body of research on that. So there's an equity goal in giving Palo Alto a slightly extra share of housing. And the second reason is that cities that are close to jobs and cities that are accessible by both auto and public transit. We have 2 to 3 Caltrain stations. We have 2 freeways that provide access. And we are in the middle of a set of job nodes. That does what I think John said. It reduces congestion in GHG. It takes some families who are commuting 90 minutes a day, if we can provide an opportunity for them to live not next to the job, but close to the job, they have increased family time, and the companies have access to workers who are no longer struggling with whether they have to move to Reno. That's why our numbers are a little bit higher. The housing element update process has 3 components. The first is to identify a sufficient number of sites that could hold the housing and that could reasonably expected to attract developers, that they would be feasible. And right now, Palo Alto has completed that first step. The second step, and I'll get into it later, the next meeting is February 3rd. And after this, we will help everybody who signed up for the meeting know more about how to engage in Palo Alto. The second is that there are a whole number of constraints, both for housing for very low income residents where funding is a huge constraint, but there are also constraints that both nonprofit and private market developers face. And Palo Alto has discussed those. We increased the zoning and reduced the parking and retail requirements for Wilton Court, which is our latest 100% affordable housing project. We have zones that give increased density if you have a certain amount of housing for low income residents. We recognize that parking and fees and other things may make projects not feasible. So that's going to be the major area I think that you might discuss. I've seen the survey questions that you're going to see in a little while, and that the housing element working group will be discussing. I think I'll end with going back to this is about housing for all. And one of the ways you see that is that a large amount of the housing for low income folks is built as part of larger market rate projects. We have what's called inclusionary zoning, where projects have to give 15%, or if we give them a density bonus, maybe 20% of the units for low and moderate income families. And so in that way, the needs of all of the residents are connected. And I'll end with the teacher housing project. I bet if you ask Liz and some of the other former city council members that they could not now afford to live in Palo Alto, where the median home price is $2 to $3 million. What we've done, and we're by no means any worse than any other city. Everybody is struggling with the fact that regular moderate income families, as well as low income families, are struggling to find affordable housing in this region. So I'm going to stop now, and I think you're going to take a survey that will bring you and the breakout groups into the solution area. Thank you.
Dan, why don't you introduce the poll?
Take a few minutes to complete the poll, and then we're going to look at results together.
You probably should mention that people will not be identified with anything they say.
Yes, that's right. This is anonymous. Yeah. We have 62 who have responded, but I'm gonna have to end the poll now because we got to keep moving. To pay for subsidies to developers to build housing for all, increase taxes. Well, most people were either not sure or agreed, and there was a little disagreement about it, but there's a lot of unsureness. To pay for subsidies, issue bonds. Well, let's see. There certainly seems to be fewer people who aren't sure about that, and about the same number of people disagree and strongly disagree with the idea of doing subsidies through either bonds or taxes. But most people agree with that. Take now empty office buildings and parking lots and convert them to housing. Most people strongly agreed with that, and very few disagreed. Build new housing units on top of municipal parking structures. Okay, there was less of a strong agreement on that one, but there was certainly more agreement than disagreement on that. No strong disagreements. Number 6, making accessory dwelling units more available in Palo Alto residential neighborhoods. For example, by easing parking restrictions on the streets of these units or by improving access to public transportation. Most, again, people agreed with this. There's little disagreement. Very similar results down the line here. It's just the amount of strength of agreement varies between that and being not sure or only somewhat agreeing. There is very little disagreement with any of these alternatives, at least so far. And that continues on with our trend with this issue about promoting legislation that improves renter rights and protections. And then allowing developers to build new condominiums or rental units containing more than 5 floors. Again, the same pattern. It's about the same amount of disagreement. No strong disagreement on that one, however. Then number 9, to increase the likelihood that residents walk or bike for shopping and services, require that there be critical facilities, such as food markets near new multi-family developments. Again, a lot of agreement, a little disagreement. But then we get to the last one, pretty strong disagreement. I'm not surprised about this one. Kind of expected this. To allow developers to build housing in some sections of Palo Alto city parks and hiking parks. There are very few agree with that. Only 3% strongly agree, and 10% agree, and a lot of disagreement on this one. Makes it basically 66% don't want any development in the parks.
And I have a little bit of a question here, because before we move into the breakout rooms, I'm finding the tax question quite subjective. I am almost positive that most of the people joining this meeting tonight are homeowners. Now, I may be wrong and I'm making a conjecture there, but homeowners traditionally do not want taxes raised. Therein lies the issue of practically our 90% of our housing crisis. So I'm really feeling as a renter and a low-income person that, that kind of question in the future should be framed a little bit differently. Instead of a yes and no question or agree, maybe it could be framed in a, how would you see funding this, if not through taxes? Something like that, because I'm already feeling excluded. Because as a very low income, low wage worker, I feel like that's really one of the only ways that we are going to get housing built, besides subsidizing it from the federal government. So I'm putting it out there as a feeling and an experience, having been homeless.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go to our breakout groups now. And if you could share that thought and get some reaction from the folks in your breakout to your point, and
yeah,
maybe you can kind of follow that.
Maybe even when these things happen, as an anonymous saying how many in this group are homeowners, how many are renters, because you're gonna see it skewed.
I agree. I'm a renter as well.
Okay.
Let me just suggest we get into the breakout rooms and we can have.
Yes, continue that thought in the breakout room, please. what are the highlights? And I want the facilitators to be very brief. A couple of sentences, what was spoken about in your group. I'll start and try to be really brief. Here were things that were brought up. There's a Palo Alto housing working group. They meet every week. People can, housing element working group, and people can attend those meetings. Elect new city council members that support more options for housing and support all options that are available, because we have a real problem in Palo Alto. Comparing the cost of incarcerating people, given they're spending tons of money on jail in Santa Clara County versus housing somebody would be an interesting number to, and just broadly having a broader community conversation on this issue, getting more people involved in the community conversation about the crisis that we're facing. Okay, I'm done. Who wants to be the next facilitator? Ellen Smith. I'm going to go in the numbers. Ellen,
Okay.
next.
Okay. Well, our group felt that glad to see that there was receptivity, at least in this group, to a number of different proposals and ways of potentially facilitating, promoting, like reducing the requirements on building, moving towards more inclusiveness, building on unused or underutilized sites. But we did raise the question of how representative our group is, given, and someone said, the nature of Palo Alto politics today. There really is a lot of controversy about housing, and not the kinds of things we're talking about are not being well received by other parts of the community. Someone mentioned working on the Palo Alto process, again, trying to get to speed up when there are possibilities that we need to also push for the state level to provide more support for housing, make things happen.
Thank you.
And I will throw in a reference. Someone mentioned United Hope Builders in East Palo Alto, which is working on things like modular housing and other kinds of solutions such as that.
Thank you, Ellen. And I'm going to ask the other facilitators to not repeat something that Ellen or myself have said, but just give us the new stuff that we haven't mentioned yet, so to save time. Okay, I'm going to call on Ellen Forbes now.
Yeah, our group had issues with the first two questions about what kind of taxes, and one person, and probably several, I meant to ask for raised hands for who agrees, will support progressive, not regressive taxes. The ARB has proposed building on parking lots, and I believe they have decided to recommend that one of the parking lots be built on top of. And the questions were structured the way they were in order to highlight the fact that change was going to have to come. What the current system is not working. And the final point is that we're accustomed to a lot of space, and we may just have to lower our sights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Mary Ann.
Some of the other areas that our group covered was that we need more education in some of the issues that are related to this problem, and to go to more community education, community meetings. And they would like to see success stories from other communities, and also more housing options. It's not just a single level house on a big lot. It's got to be more options than that. And would like to have some federal funding and be more proactive and work with looking at different solutions, like working with large employers to provide options for housing, and get some rental projections.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Tony, next.
Yes, in our group, there was a general agreement on the questions, but we also felt that our group is probably demographically skewed and more liberal possibly than the general population. The devil is in the details in all the different proposals. For example, higher than 5 stories buildings, where would you locate them, etc. A lot of questions. A new point came up here in our group with investment homes. There are quite a few of those. They remain empty. would people put ADUs in those investment homes? But they're a drain on our land use. There is some disagreement on taxes, whether or not to have taxes to address this issue. And we talk about various tax options, parcel taxes, and and also address bonds, but they require payback over a long period of time. One comment was also that the people living in houses have enjoyed huge appreciation of the values of the property. The implication being that they should be willing to share that benefit with others who are less fortunate.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Peter.
Thank you. So most of our points have already been covered. So I'll just add a few tweaks. There's a general consensus that these issues are complicated and not all the questions covered every possible angle that was relevant. That goes without saying. In terms of the problem of empty houses being bought as investments, someone suggested perhaps a vacancy tax that could fund some of the other programs, or maybe inducements could be provided for those places to be temporarily used by lower income people and all of that. One issue we addressed that I don't think came up elsewhere, at least hasn't been yet reported. Somebody worried that maybe we would simply aggravate problems of parking and traffic congestion and all that. But somebody else pointed out that if we bring people who are currently commuting 90 minutes to be able to walk to work or take a bus, and there's lots of public transportation around and lots of roads around, we could be easing some of the congestion problems.
Thank you, Peter. And last, Laura.
So most has already been mentioned, most items, but there was a very strong push that we all need to be involved and contact our city council members and be involved in being more educated and up to date on the issue. And also that we should be looking at neighboring cities that have been lauded as having done good work in this housing area, and we should be learning from them, especially those cities nearby that are similar to ours. We could learn from them and possibly have plans similar to theirs. And then there were some comments having to do with just the systems in place for developers and how we might have to look at the kinds of hoops they have to jump through in order to develop property. Looking at the fees and height restrictions, et cetera, taking a fresh look at that and see if that helps move things along.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Now we're going to spend a few minutes on question and answer, and then John is going to give some closing remarks. What I'd like you to do is go to the chat and type in if you have a question, and please limit yourself to asking questions to the panelists, to the speakers, okay? Yeah.
Part of my volunteer effort will be to help the league follow up with everybody who's registered on how they can engage in the housing element working group and when this stuff goes to the planning commission and council. I want to make engagement opportunities real.
Okay.
I'd like to just add, I just am asking all the homeowners out there for your support as a renter struggling, head of household, single parent, 2 kids in school. Please, please consider a small tax levy on your homes. I know you're struggling too, and I know you're not billionaires or millionaires. I just am pleading with people that we have to level the playing field, and it is extremely, since Prop 13, we're there. It was a warning, and we're there 40 years later, 50, whatever it is.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Liz. Okay, here's some questions that are coming in. I'm going to go through these. Okay, there's a question. How can low-income housing be made to pencil out? Who would like to try to answer that?
I'll take a stab at that.
Okay.
The reality is property is valued on its market value. So if somebody owns a piece of land that is zoned for housing, its value is based on the market rate that can be developed from the rents at the zoning allowance. So 4 stories of market rate housing. So if you want to build affordable housing where you have substantially lower rents, you have to find a way to reduce the cost of the construction, reduce the cost of the land, or offset the cost in some way. So an example is when the community working group built 801 Alma, the city of Palo Alto donated the substation, so that land was free. The community working group bought 1/3 of the property with a loan based on funds that had been raised previously. And then we got tax credits, and then Liz Niss was very instrumental in helping us get Stanford University GUP money from the county. And so we were able to have essentially free land as a offset cost in the tax credits and cash through the GUP to offset mortgage payments. And we're able to rent those apartments at 35% of the area median income. So 1/3 of the market rate effectively. So you need subsidies, you need free land, you need tax credits, you need incentives from cities or private entities to make it work.
Okay, we have time for, I'm going to say we have time for a couple more questions that have just shown up. Okay, and the first question is, why is real estate so outrageously expensive here? I am speaking of single family homes. It cost $35 million to build 70-unit Mayfield Place. This did not pencil out with the poor quality of the materials that only 4 years ago, and that was built only 4 years ago, and it's now falling apart. Anybody like to try to take a shot at that one?
Steve, you want to tackle that one?
You're on mute, Steve.
Why don't we go on to another one? That's not going to get any place.
Okay. All right. So how can we encourage people to live? How can we encourage people who live in houses which are too big for them? 1 or 2 older people still living in a home suitable for a family of 4. How can we get a family like that to move to smaller homes?
So I'll give you my example. When the kids moved out, we wanted to downsize, but the barrier and the opportunity was we wanted to remain in Palo Alto. So to help that process, you're going to need to build some very attractive, probably somewhat expensive condominiums like the one we finally found downtown, where people who want to downsize but remain in a great area can have an option. You have to create options for people living in large houses to be able to get them to move. And one of that is simply supply.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And there's one more question. I think it's an important one. Can we build below market rate housing that can be purchased and resold at below market rates for teachers and their families who want to remain in the community?
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. You can deed restrict purchase properties and restrict the amount of money that they can gain in appreciation so that it remains affordable throughout the life of the project.
Okay, great. I think we're going to end it there with questions. In fact, that is the last question. So can you give your closing remarks now, John?
Yeah, I'll just be really brief. I think we've had a lot of information come our way tonight. And I think that it's incumbent on each of us to continue to learn about the housing challenges. Sigrid Pinsky, who I've known for a long time, remarked in the breakout session that it was like drinking from a fire hose. And I think that that's the reality. We have a lot to learn. It's a complex issue. It's complex socially, it's complex politically, It's complex economically. It's complex in terms of planning and architecture, and of course in finance. And anything that we can do with our expertise to develop expertise in adjacent areas will help us as a community build the kind of housing that we need in order to maintain the Palo Alto that we all have come to love and enjoy, which is a diverse, vibrant community. Before we close, I want to thank Liz Niss for her introduction tonight, and thank Dan Zalis and his team's work for building this event. We've worked really hard over the last few months, and Dan did the yeoman's work. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters, and thank all of you for attending and participating and being participatory and sharing your thoughts. And we have a lot of work to do. Thanks a lot and good night.